All right, let's dive into a story that's, well, it's part miracle and part cautionary tale. We're talking about the Green Revolution, a scientific breakthrough that saved a staggering number of lives, but also created some of the biggest environmental headaches we're dealing with today.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? We actually solved world hunger once, so can we do it again? And this time, can we do it without, completely wrecking the planet in the process?
Okay, so to really grasp just how huge this revolution was, you gotta understand the problem it was trying to solve. Let's jump in a time machine and head back to the middle of the 20th century.
I mean, for a place like India, the numbers were just terrifying. Their population was booming, but their food production just couldn't keep up. They were staring down the barrel of mass famine, literally having to import food just to stop people from starving. Something had to give, and it had to give fast.
And then it happened. A radical new approach showed up. This was the beginning of what we now call the first green revolution. It was basically a tech fix for a global nightmare.
And what's so cool about this timeline is that it wasn't just one guy having a eureka moment. It was more like a global scientific relay race. It all started in the 50s with Dr. Norman Borlaug doing this game-changing work on wheat down in Mexico. That success then leads to the creation of the International Rice Research Institute. And the results? They were so mind-blowing that by 1968, the whole movement got its official name, the Green Revolution.
Now, this is super important to understand. It wasn't just some magic seed. No, it was a whole package deal. The star of the show was this new high-yielding variety seed, the HYV. But these seeds were kind of like divas. To get them to perform their magic, they needed a whole entourage, tons of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and a whole lot of water. You needed the whole shebang, or it just wouldn't work.
And the results? I mean, they were absolutely staggering. Just look at that number, 82%. That was the increase in India's total food grain production in just 14 years. Think about that. This wasn't just a little bump. It was a complete game changer. A country on the brink of starvation was suddenly looking at a future where it could feed itself.
Yeah, and this chart just spells it out perfectly. Just look at wheat, for example. Before all this, India was producing about 10 million tons. Fast forward a little over a decade, and that number jumps to over 35 million tons. It more than tripled. India went from what people called a ship-to-mouth existence, completely depending on aid, to having more than enough food.
But, like in any good story, there was a twist. This incredible success, it came with a pretty hefty price tag, one that nobody really saw coming. And as the years rolled by, the dark side of this miracle started to show.
Yeah, decades later, people started telling a very different story. And this quote from a Greenpeace report, wow, it just hits you, right? The very thing that saved them was now creating a whole new kind of disaster.
And the price of all that food was steep, for sure. You can see here how it all connects. All those chemicals, they were wrecking the soil. Planting only wheat and rice over and over, kiss your biodiversity goodbye. The massive need for water was literally draining the ground dry. And then there's the human cost. It created this huge gap where the rich farmers got richer and the small guys, they often got buried in debt.
And here's the kicker. This inequality wasn't some unfortunate side effect. It was kind of built into the plan from the start. The whole strategy was to bet on the strong. That meant pouring all the resources into areas that already had water and into the farmers who could actually afford this expensive new tech. So what about everyone else? Well, they got left in the dust, and the gap between the haves and have-nots just got wider and wider.
So, with all these devastating side effects piling up, it became pretty clear that this model wasn't sustainable. Scientists, policymakers, everyone had to go back to the drawing board. And that's where we get this call for a Green Revolution 2.0. Basically, a total reboot.
And you can see the difference in thinking right here. The first Green Revolution, it had one mission, and one mission only: get the biggest yield possible, no matter what. But this new version, Green Revolution 2.0, it's playing a totally different game. The goal now is sustainability, resilience. It's not just about a couple of crops anymore. It's about diversification. It's about actually caring for the soil for the long haul, not just treating it like a chemical sponge.
So what's in the toolbox for this new revolution? Well, it's this really cool mix of super futuristic tech and, old school wisdom. You've got biotech and genetic engineering making crops tougher. You have drones and GPS helping farmers be way more efficient. But then you also have a huge focus on sustainable stuff like organic farming. And it's about looking at the whole picture, the entire food chain, from the dirt to your dinner plate.
Okay, so this all brings us to the really big, really important question. What's next? What does the future of our food even look like? And right at the heart of that debate is something people are calling the gene revolution. This is all about using biotech, specifically genetically modified or GM seeds, to engineer the next wave of supercrops. And the promise here is enormous. We're talking about plants that can fight their own battles against pests, that can handle drought, and that can give us more food using way less water and chemicals. Sounds pretty good, right?
But, and this is a huge but, there's a massive difference this time around. See, the science for the first revolution was mostly public. It was developed by researchers and shared with the world. This new gene revolution, it's mostly private. We're talking about giant corporations who own the patents to these seeds. And that brings up some really tough questions, doesn't it? Who gets to use this tech? Who can afford it? And maybe the biggest question of all, who's going to control our food supply?
So that brings us right back to where we started. The first green revolution showed us that we're smart enough to solve seemingly impossible problems. But it also taught us a really painful lesson, that sometimes the quick fix leads to long-term disaster. Now, as we're looking at this next massive shift in agriculture, the challenge isn't just about the science. It's about what we value. Can we actually innovate our way to a future that feeds everyone, that's sustainable and that's fair? Or are we just going to focus on the bottom line? That's really the question for all of us, isn't it?